The ship landed in the Imperial Plaza at sunset, and the whole court had gathered to watch Princess Valith, Sonkai, return from her diplomatic mission to the quarantined world called Earth. She had been gone for 2 years. The Emperor himself stood on the golden steps of the palace, surrounded by lords and ladies whose families had ruled star systems for thousands of years. The ship's doors opened. Valith stepped out first, tall and elegant, her silver skin glowing in the fading light. Behind her came something no one expected. A human. He was shorter than the Ascendancy people, with brown skin and dark hair and eyes that moved too quickly, taking in everything around him. He wore simple clothes. He carried no weapons. He had no servants. He walked beside the princes as if he belonged there. The court fell silent. Then someone laughed. Then everyone laughed. "What is that?" Duke Voron asked loudly, not bothering to hide his voice. "Did she bring back a pet?" The human heard him. His expression did not change. He simply looked at Duke Voron for a long moment, as if memorizing his face, and then looked away. Princess Valith raised her chin. "This is Marcus Cole," she announced. "He is my husband. You will treat him with the respect his position demands." The laughter stopped, but the silence that followed was worse. The Emperor's face turned cold. He looked at Marcus the way one might look at an insect that had crawled onto the dinner table. "We will discuss this privately," the Emperor said. He turned and walked into the palace without acknowledging Marcus at all. That was the beginning. The court decided very quickly that the human was a joke. They called him the pet when they thought he could not hear, and a curiosity when they knew he could. They sent him invitations to important events with the wrong dates written on them. Servants forgot to translate conversations for him. Guards pretended not to see him when he tried to enter rooms he had every right to enter. Marcus endured it all. He smiled politely. He thanked people for their cruelty as if it were kindness. He never complained to Valith, though she saw everything and burned with quiet rage. "Why do you not fight back?" she asked him one night, as they sat alone in their chambers. "You have every right to demand respect." Marcus looked out the window at the alien stars. "Fighting back is what they expect," he said. "They want me to lose my temper. They want me to make a mistake. So I will not give them what they want. Then what will you do?" He smiled. It was the same smile he had shown Duke Voron on the first day. Patient, knowing, dangerous. "I will watch," he said. "I will listen. I will learn." And that is exactly what he did. The court thought Marcus was too stupid to learn their language. They spoke freely around him, discussing politics and schemes and secrets, never imagining that the human understood every word. They were wrong. Marcus had been studying their language for 18 months, ever since he had first met Valith. He understood everything. He remembered everything. He learned that Duke Voron was stealing money from the Imperial Treasury. He learned that Lady Sen was having a secret affair with a rival lord. He learned that the Emperor's oldest son was plotting against his younger brother. He learned which families hated each other and why. He learned where the power truly lay in the Ascendancy. And it was not always where people thought. He wrote it all down in a small book, using a human language that no one in the Empire could read at the same time. Marcus did something else that no one noticed. He made friends with the Forgotten People. The Ascendancy was a society built on hierarchy. Lords commanded and servants obeyed. The great families were everything, and the common people were nothing. No one important ever spoke to servants except to give orders. No one important ever learned their names. Marcus learned their names. He asked about their families. He remembered their birthdays. He thanked them when they brought him food or cleaned his rooms. He listened when they talked about their problems. At first, they were suspicious. No one had ever treated them this way. They thought he was trying to trick them somehow. But Marcus was patient. He kept being kind, day after day, month after month, until they finally believed that he meant it. And then they started to talk to him. They told him things that the great lords would never know. They told him which doors were left unlocked at night. They told him which guards could be bribed. They told him secrets that they heard while serving dinner or cleaning rooms. They told him everything, because he was the only person in the whole palace who had ever treated them like they mattered. Information flows downward before it flows up, Marcus told Valeth one evening. The people at the bottom see everything. They hear everything, and no one ever thinks to ask them about it. Valeth looked at her husband with new eyes. She had married him because she saw his potential on Earth, watching him negotiate peace between enemies who had fought for generations. She had seen how he turned hatred into understanding through nothing but patience and words. But she had not fully understood what he was capable of until now. "You are building something," she said. "I am learning," Marcus replied. "For now, that is enough." A year passed. The court continued to mock the human. They told jokes about his short lifespan, his weak body, his primitive world. They said that Valeth had lost her mind, that she had shamed her family, that the emperor should annul the marriage and send the creature back where it came from. Marcus heard all of it. He wrote all of it down. He kept smiling that patient smile. And then, on a quiet evening in his second year at the palace, he closed his notebook and told Valeth something that made her blood run cold. "I know enough now," he said. "I know every secret this court has tried to hide. I know every crime they have committed. I know who is loyal and who is not. I know who can be trusted and who would sell their own children for power." He looked at her with eyes that were no longer soft. "When the time comes," he said, "I will make them wish they had been kinder to the pet." Valeth believed him. The crisis came without warning. 3 star systems in the outer provinces declared independence on the same day. They destroyed the imperial outposts, captured the supply ships, and cut off the trade routes that fed half the empire. The emperor called an emergency council. Every important lord and lady gathered in the war room, a massive chamber filled with floating maps and military displays. They argued for hours about how many ships to send, which planets to bomb first, and who would lead the attack. No one asked why the rebellion had happened. No one wondered what the outer provinces wanted. They only talked about how to crush them. Marcus was not supposed to be at this council. Valeth had a seat because she was a princess, but humans had no place in matters of war. He came anyway, standing quietly in the corner where no one noticed him. For 3 hours, he listened to plans for death. The lords talked about acceptable casualties in the millions. They discussed which cities to turn into examples. They calculated the cost of rebuilding after they had finished destroying. Finally, Marcus spoke. "What do the rebels actually want?" Every head turned toward the corner. The room fell silent. Duke Vorn's face twisted with disgust. "Who let the pet in here?" he demanded. "I asked a question," Marcus said calmly. "Has anyone here talked to the rebel leaders? Has anyone asked why they are willing to die rather than stay in the Empire?" The Emperor stared at Marcus as if seeing him for the first time. "They are traitors," he said slowly, as if explaining something to a child. "Traitors do not get to explain themselves. They get punished. And when you punish them, what happens to the trade routes? What happens to the food supplies? How many loyal citizens starve while you burn your enemies?" The room went very still. No one spoke to the Emperor this way. No one challenged his decisions. But Marcus stood there without fear, waiting for an answer. It was Valeth who broke the silence. "My husband raises a fair point," she said carefully. "Perhaps we should understand the situation before we respond to it." The Emperor's eyes moved between his daughter and her human husband. Something calculated passed across his face. "Very well," he said. "If the human thinks he can do better than my generals, let him try. Send him to the outer provinces. Let him talk to the rebels." He smiled coldly. "We will see how long he survives." Marcus bowed. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I will leave tomorrow." Everyone in the room expected him to die. That was the point. The Emperor had found an elegant solution to the problem of his daughter's embarrassing marriage. The rebels would kill the human, and no one would have to take responsibility. Marcus knew this. He went anyway. He traveled alone, in a small ship with no weapons. When he reached the rebel territory, they captured him immediately. They'd put him in a cell and promised to execute him the next morning as a symbol of their defiance. That night, Marcus asked to speak with the rebel leaders. They came to mock him, expecting to laugh at the doomed pet of the imperial princess. Instead, Marcus did something they did not expect. He asked about their children. He asked about their crops. He asked about their lives. "I did not come here to threaten you," he said. "I came here to understand. Tell me why you would rather die than remain in the Empire." At first, they did not believe him. They thought it was a trick. But Marcus sat in his cell and listened for hours, asking question after question, never judging, never arguing. Slowly, the truth came out. The outer provinces were dying. For 50 years, a bureaucratic error had been reducing their resource allocations. Every year, they received less food, less medicine, less everything. They had sent hundreds of petitions to the imperial capital. Every single one had been ignored. "We are not traitors," the rebel leader said bitterly. "We are starving people who were left to die. No one in the capital even knows we exist." Marcus nodded slowly. "Show me the petitions," he said. "Show me everything." They showed him. They showed him reports of children dying from diseases that were easily cured elsewhere in the Empire. They showed him records of pleas that had been sent year after year without any response. They showed him evidence that proved the outer provinces had tried everything before they had chosen violence. Marcus spent 3 weeks in the rebel territory. He ate their food, which was poor and scarce. He slept in their homes, which were cold and crumbling. He met their families and heard their stories. He became their friend, and then he returned to the capital with 2 things: a peace agreement and a list of names. The peace agreement was simple. The outer provinces would return to the Empire if their petitions were finally heard and their problems were fixed. They did not want independence. They just wanted to survive. The list of names was more dangerous. It contained every imperial official who had ignored the petitions. It contained evidence of bribes and corruption. It contained proof that the suffering of millions had been caused by greed and laziness in the capital. Marcus presented both documents to the Emperor in open court. "The rebellion is over," he announced. "The outer provinces will lay down their weapons. In exchange, Your Majesty will remove the corrupt officials who caused this crisis and restore proper supplies to the affected systems." The Emperor had no choice. Refusing would make him look weak and foolish. He accepted the agreement through gritted teeth. The court was furious. They had wanted a war. Wars meant military contracts and promotions and glory. This human had stolen their opportunity with nothing but talking and listening. Worse, he had made them look incompetent. The entire rebellion could have been prevented if anyone had simply paid attention. "Duke," Voron cornered Marcus after the council. "You think you are clever," he hissed. "You think you have won something, but you have only made enemies. Powerful enemies." Marcus looked at the Duke with that same patient smile. "I have made many things, Your Grace. Enemies are the least important." That night, the first assassin came to kill him. The first assassin was a professional, trained from birth in the art of silent killing. He entered Marcus's chambers through a window that should have been locked. Moving without sound across the marble floor, thought he tripped on a rug that should not have been there and fell forward, striking his head on the corner of a table. He died instantly. The palace guards found him the next morning. They ruled it an accident. Marcus expressed polite concern and asked if anyone knew who the man was. No one did, officially. The second assassin came a week later. She was even more skilled than the first, a master of poisons who could kill with a single touch. She cornered Marcus in a quiet hallway, reaching for him with deadly fingers. The next day, she was found wandering in the palace gardens. Her memory was gone. She could not remember her own name, let alone why she had come to the capital. She kept talking about the smiling human who knew too much. No one could explain what had happened. The doctor said her mind had simply broken. Marcus offered his sympathy and moved on. Duke Voron sent 4 more assassins over the following months. None of them succeeded. One was arrested before he could reach Marcus, betrayed by a servant who happened to overhear his plans. Another discovered that his weapons had been replaced with harmless copies. A third received a message from his family begging him to come home immediately, claiming his father was dying, and he left without completing his mission. His father was fine. The Duke began to wonder if Marcus was protected by some strange human magic. He was not. He was protected by something far more powerful. For years, Marcus had been building friendships with the forgotten people of the palace. The servants who cleaned the rooms and served the food. The guards who stood at doorways for hours without anyone acknowledging them. The technicians who maintained the systems that kept the palace running. The minor officials who processed paperwork that the great lords never bothered to read. These people knew everything that happened in the palace. They saw the assassins arrive. They heard the plots being made. And because Marcus was the only person who had ever treated them with kindness, they protected him. They moved rugs to the wrong places. They switched weapons. They sent false messages. They warned Marcus about dangers before they arrived. They became his eyes and ears and shield, and no one in the court ever suspected because no one ever paid attention to servants. Marcus used this network to do more than just survive. He began to play the court's game of power and influence. But he played it by rules they had never seen before. When a lord tried to block a trade agreement that would help common people, embarrassing financial records appeared in public data streams. When a lady spread lies about Valith, her own secrets were whispered to her rivals. When officials took bribes to ignore problems, their crimes were documented and saved for the perfect moment. Marcus never threatened anyone directly. He never made demands. He simply let information flow to the right places at the right times, and he watched his enemies destroy themselves. Duke Voron was the first great lord to fall. He had been planning to frame Valith for treason, creating false evidence that she was plotting against her father. It was a clever scheme that would have worked perfectly. Instead, a week before Voron could act, every detail of his financial corruption became public. Records showed that he had been stealing from the imperial treasury for decades. Evidence proved that he had bribed judges and murdered witnesses. Documents revealed that his entire fortune was built on crime. Voron's allies abandoned him overnight. His family disowned him. The emperor stripped him of his titles and lands. He fled to exile on a distant planet, ruined and alone. Marcus had never accused him of anything. He had simply made sure that the truth was known. The court stopped laughing at the human after that. They started watching him with fear. Princess Violet's influence grew as her rivals fell one by one. She gained seats on important councils. She won support from houses that had once opposed her. She became one of the most powerful voices in the empire, and everyone knew that her husband was the reason. The emperor finally summoned Marcus for a private meeting. They sat alone in the throne room, the old ruler and the young human, surrounded by thousands of years of imperial history. "You have become a problem," the Emperor said directly. "My court is afraid of you. My children are afraid of you. Even I am beginning to wonder what you are capable of." "I have only ever done what was right," Marcus replied calmly. "I ended a rebellion that could have destroyed millions of lives. I exposed criminals who were stealing from your people. I have not broken a single law. You have broken something more important. You have broken the way things work." Marcus nodded slowly. "Yes, I have. Because the way things work was causing suffering. The way things work was making your empire weak. The way things work needed to change." The Emperor leaned forward. "What do you want, human? Power? Wealth? A planet of your own? Name your price and leave my empire in peace." It was an honest offer. The Emperor would have given Marcus almost anything to make him go away. Marcus smiled that patient smile. "I want your people to thrive, Majesty. All of them, not just the ones born into great houses. I want children in the outer provinces to have the same chances as children in the capital. I want servants to be treated as people instead of furniture. I want an empire that deserves loyalty instead of demanding it." He paused. "That is all I have ever wanted." The Emperor stared at him for a long time. He was trying to understand a kind of ambition he had never encountered. "He failed. You are dangerous," the Emperor said finally. "More dangerous than anyone realizes. I should have you killed." "You have tried," Marcus reminded him gently. The Emperor laughed bitterly. "Yes, I suppose I have." He stood and walked toward the door. "Stay out of my way, human. My patience has limits." Marcus bowed respectfully. "Of course, Your Majesty." But they both knew that patience would not matter soon. The Emperor was old. He had perhaps 10 years left. And when he died, everything would change. Marcus was already preparing. The Emperor died on a cold winter morning, surrounded by doctors who could not save him. His death was not murder or conspiracy. It was simply arrogance. He had ignored a medical condition for years because seeking treatment would have meant admitting weakness. By the time he finally allowed the doctors to examine him, it was far too late. Within hours, the succession war began. 3 heirs had claims to the throne. Prince Karth was the oldest, a military commander who believed strength was the only thing that mattered. Prince Valen was the second son, a schemer who had spent his life making secret deals with powerful houses. Princess Velith was the third, dismissed by her brothers because she had married a human. For 1,000 years, the ascendancy had chosen its rulers through force. The heirs would gather their armies and fight until only one remained. It was bloody and wasteful, and it often took decades. But it was tradition. The princes began mobilizing their fleets immediately. Karth controlled the military. Valen controlled the intelligence networks. Both expected the war to be between them, with Velith as a minor distraction to be eliminated early. Then Marcus made his proposal. He stood before the Council of Lords, the governing body that would oversee the succession, and suggested something that had never been done in the entire history of the empire. "Let the people choose," he said. The council stared at him in confusion. Some of them did not even understand what he was suggesting. The idea of common citizens having a voice in who ruled them was so foreign that it barely made sense. "An election," Marcus explained. "Every adult in the empire votes for the candidate they want. The one with the most votes becomes emperor or empress. No war, no death, no decades of fighting." Lord Hessen, the head of the council, laughed out loud. "You want us to ask farmers and servants who should rule? This is madness. This is barbarism. This is human thinking. Is it madness to avoid a war that will kill millions?" Marcus asked quietly, "Is it barbarism to let people have a say in their own future? Is it human thinking to believe that power should be earned rather than seized?" The council argued for days. Prince Korath demanded that the proposal be rejected. Prince Valen tried to find ways to cheat the system before it even started. Both brothers were terrified of a process they could not control with weapons or bribes, but Marcus had spent years building relationships with the minor houses, the lords who had been ignored by the great families, the houses that had suffered during the succession wars of the past, the families who had lost sons and daughters to senseless conflict. These houses supported the election. They convinced others. They formed a coalition that grew larger every day. In the end, the council had no choice. Too many lords had already declared for the new way. Rejecting the election would have started a different kind of civil war. Princess Valeth announced her candidacy on the first day. The campaign that followed was unlike anything the Ascendancy had ever seen. Korath and Valen tried to compete using the only methods they knew. They made threats. They offered bribes. They sent soldiers to intimidate voters. Marcus taught Valeth a different approach. She traveled to the outer provinces that Marcus had saved from war. She visited factories and farms and hospitals. She listened to ordinary people describe their problems and promised to fix them. She held public debates where she answered questions honestly, even when the answers were difficult. She admitted mistakes. She acknowledged that the empire needed to change. Most importantly, she did something no member of the royal family had ever done before. She treated common people as if their opinions mattered. The princes could not understand what was happening. They watched Veleth's support grow, and they had no idea how to stop it. They tried spreading lies about her, but Marcus had built a network of information that exposed every false story within hours. They tried to assassinate her, but the servants and guards who had protected Marcus now protected her as well. 1 month before the vote, Prince Korath tried to seize the throne by force. His fleet attacked the capital, hoping to end the election before it could happen. He failed. The soldiers he expected to follow him refused to fight. They were fathers and mothers with families in the capital. They were men and women who had listened to Veleth's speeches about a better empire. They were citizens who had decided, for the first time in their lives, that they wanted to choose their own future. Korath was arrested and exiled. Valen fled the next day, taking his bribes and his secrets to a distant corner of the galaxy. On election day, 80% of the empire voted for Valeth Sorenkai. She was crowned empress in the same plaza where Marcus had first arrived as a laughingstock. He stood beside her, dressed in the simple clothes he had always worn, surrounded by millions of cheering citizens. Her first official act was to name Marcus her imperial consort. He would have full authority to speak in her name. He would sit beside the throne at every council. He would help her rule the largest empire in the known galaxy. The court that had called him a pet now bowed before him. Duke Vorin, watching from exile through a data stream, saw the ceremony and understood what had happened. The human had never wanted the throne for himself. He had wanted something far more ambitious. He had wanted to change what the throne meant. Marcus looked out at the crowd of human and alien faces, all of them celebrating a future they had chosen for themselves. He thought about his small notebook filled with secrets. He thought about the servants who had become his friends. He thought about every insult he had endured with that patient smile. It had all been worth it. But the real work was just beginning. 10 years after Valeth became empress, historians gave a name to what Marcus had done. They called it the Quiet Revolution. It was not quiet, really. There were riots when Marcus established the first schools for common children. There were rebellions when he created courts where ordinary citizens could bring complaints against noble families. There were assassination attempts beyond counting. And one brief civil war when 3 great houses joined together to try to restore the old ways. But compared to the blood that had marked every other change in imperial history, it was very quiet indeed. Marcus worked every day from dawn until long after midnight. He never took an official title beyond imperial consort. He never claimed any territory or wealth for himself. He simply sat beside Valeth and helped her reshape an empire that had not changed in 10,000 years. The changes came slowly at first. New laws that protected workers. New taxes on families that hoarded wealth while their citizens starved. New rights for species that had been conquered and treated as inferior. The old guard fought against every change. They said Marcus was destroying tradition. They said he was weakening the empire. They said his human thinking would lead to ruin. But the changes kept coming, and something strange happened. The empire grew stronger. Planets that had once been restless and rebellious became loyal and productive. Species that had fought against imperial rule for generations began sending ambassadors instead of armies. Trade increased. Innovation flourished. The economy grew faster than it had in centuries. It turned out that people worked harder when they believed their work mattered. It turned out that citizens were more loyal when they felt respected. It turned out that an empire built on cooperation was stronger than one built on fear. Other civilizations watched in disbelief. The Ascendancy had been their enemy for thousands of years, a predator that consumed everything it touched. Now it was becoming something else entirely, something that seemed almost impossible. Ambassadors came from across the galaxy to meet with Marcus. They wanted to understand how a single mortal human had transformed an immortal empire. They expected some secret weapon, some hidden power, some trick they could copy. Instead, Marcus served them tea and talked about listening. Everyone wants to matter, he told them. Everyone wants to believe their life has meaning. When you treat people as if they are unimportant, they become your enemies. When you treat them as if they have value, they become your allies. That is the whole secret. The ambassadors went home confused. It seemed too simple. It seemed too human. But they remembered his words, and some of them began to change their own worlds. Marcus grew old, as humans do. His hair turned white. His body became frail. The doctors of the Ascendancy offered to extend his life using technologies that could add centuries to his years. He refused. My mortality is not a weakness, he explained to Valeth. It is what taught me to value every moment. It is what gave me the urgency to change things rather than wait. If I lived forever, I might become like the lords who ignored suffering because they thought they had infinite time to fix it later. Valeth understood, but it broke her heart. In his final years, Marcus wrote his memoirs. He called them simply What Humans Do. The book described everything he had learned, everything he had changed, and everything he hoped would continue after he was gone. He wrote about the power of kindness, which he believed was the greatest weapon in the universe. He wrote about the importance of listening, which taught him more than any spy network. He wrote about patience, which allowed him to outlast enemies who had every advantage except the willingness to wait. And he wrote about love. His love for Valeth, who had seen potential in him when no one else did. His love for the empire he had adopted as his own. His love for every servant and guard and minor official who had helped him along the way. I did not conquer anything, he wrote in the final chapter. I did not defeat anyone. I simply showed people a different way of being, and they chose it for themselves. That is all any of us can do. We cannot force others to change. We can only change ourselves and hope that others find it worth copying. Marcus Cole died at 97 years old, surrounded by family he had never expected to have. Valeth held his hand as he passed. His last words were a whisper meant only for her. Thank you for bringing me home. The Empire mourned for a full solar year. Every planet observed a day of silence. Every ship flew black flags. Every school he had built named a classroom after him. Valeth ruled for 3 more centuries after his death. She completed the work he had started, transforming the Ascendancy into something its founders would not have recognized. She was a wise and beloved empress, respected across the galaxy, but she never took another consort. When her grandchildren asked why, she always gave the same answer. "There was only ever him," she said. "The mortal man who taught an empire that power means nothing if it is not used to lift others up." How could anyone else compare? A statue of Marcus was built in the Imperial Plaza, in the exact spot where he had first arrived as a laughingstock. It showed him as he had been in life, shorter than the giants around him, wearing simple clothes, with that patient smile on his face. The inscription was carved in every language of the empire. He came with nothing but his humanity. It was enough. Travelers from across the galaxy came to see it. Some laughed at first, unable to believe that such an ordinary figure had changed so much. But as they learned his story, they stopped laughing. They began to wonder what they might accomplish if they tried, and that, in the end, was the greatest thing Marcus Cole ever did. He made people believe that change was possible. He made them believe that one person could matter. He made them believe that kindness was not weakness, but the greatest strength of all. 1,000 years later, the galaxy was still telling stories about the human who married a princess, endured the mockery of an empire, and taught the universe what humanity could do. The stories always ended the same way. They lived, and they made things better. That was enough.